Today, in a Florida courtroom, lawyers for former President Donald Trump and the Department of Justice faced off for the first time since the search at Mar-a-Lago. Trump's lawyers seeking an independent third party known as a special master be appointed to review the documents seized in the search. The DOJ arguing that would hinder the investigation, and most importantly, the DOJ argues it's already reviewed the documents and that those documents belong to the government, not to Donald Trump. The judge, Aileen Kennan, who was appointed by Trump, said she'll rule shortly and has indicated she's inclined to order that some sort of special master be appointed. But look, none of this is going to make or break the investigation or determine whether there will be charges filed. And whatever you think about the search and the special master, it seems Trump's lawyers had been, before today's hearing, a real mess. And even Judge Kennan, who seems sympathetic to Trump's argument on this, kept asking, what's the point of a special master, since his legal team had waited 2 weeks to even ask for one. 2 weeks for what should have been a standard boilerplate day after the big search kind of filing. And when they finally did file their request, it was filled with political rhetoric, like President Donald J. Trump is the clear frontrunner in the 2024 Republican presidential primary and the 2024 general election should he decide to run, and with no understanding of the distress that it would cause most Americans, the FBI raided the home of President Donald J. Trump. Rather than sound legal arguments, it was so overtly political and confusing that the judge responded to Trump's team's initial filing by saying, in effect, please just tell me what you're looking for. Saying, explain what the precise relief sought is, and what is the basis for this court even to have jurisdiction? Really basic stuff. Now, Trump has a beefed-up legal team now, which is much better, including attorney Jim Trusty, who he apparently hired after seeing him on TV. He was on this show last month. He argued in court the classified documents were akin to a, quote, overdue library book scenario where there's a dispute, not even a dispute, but ongoing negotiations with the National Archives that has suddenly been transformed into a criminal investigation. Also in court, another prominent addition to the team, former Florida Solicitor General and Ron DeSantis aide Chris Kise. He made his public debut as part of the Trump legal team. He argued that there was a, quote, significant lack of trust between the parties, you think, and a public lack of faith in the DOJ. Now, arguing for the DOJ, Counterintelligence Chief Jay Bratt saying this of Trump, quote, he is no longer the president, and because he was no longer the president, he did not have the right to take those documents. They aren't his. So, where was Christina Bobb, Trump's attorney and one-time TV news anchor, who in the days after the FBI raid became the face of the Trump team? She may be preoccupied these days dealing with the possibility of potential legal trouble of her own. Remember, she was specifically cited in the DOJ court filing this week. If not by name, she reportedly signed a letter to the DOJ swearing on June 3rd that they had conducted a diligent search and that there was no more classified records at Mar-a-Lago. Except, of course, just over 2 months after she signed her name to that piece of paper, more than 100 classified records were found during the search. Did she lie? Was she misled? At the very least, Trump's lawyer could now become a witness. And then there's Trump attorney Evan Corcoran, who was at the hearing today, who could also be in trouble because he, too, appears to have informed investigators that all classified documents had been returned when they hadn't. And then there's Alina Habba, member of Trump's legal team, still making TV appearances. She was on Fox News' Hannity last night saying the FBI staged a photo.
I do have firsthand knowledge, as you know. I have been down there. I'm down there frequently. I have never seen that. I have never, ever seen that. That is not the way his office looks. Anybody that knows President Trump's office, he has guests frequently there. It's just a joke. They literally must have gone in and taken out documents they wanted, or cover letters, as it is, and put it about so that the public believes that this is top secret documents that were on his floor. It's ridiculous. I can tell you personally, It's ridiculous. I've never seen that.
Of course, that's true. No one's suggesting that Trump had put a photo scale and evidence marker on the floor. This was evidence gathered at Mar-a-Lago. But didn't the DOJ find classified records in his office desk? So she's saying people were going in and out of a place where there were highly classified government records? She's also a potential witness now in this case, because in a separate Trump investigation, she signed a sworn affidavit attesting that she personally searched each and every room of Trump's private residence located at Mar-a-Lago, including all desks, drawers, nightstands, dressers, closets, etc., and said she didn't find any records relating to that particular subpoena, a different issue, but it stands to reason she would have come across the many classified documents that were kept there if she did such a thorough search. Maybe most importantly, this whole special master thing, whether it's granted or not, will not make much of a difference. But that legal request opened a huge door for the DOJ. It allowed them to lay out in devastating detail the timeline of how many times they tried to secure the highly classified documents, how they granted numerous extensions, had sworn statements, and ultimately sought the search warrant, which found twice as many classified documents as when Trump's attorney handed over what they said was the final batch in June. At this point, Trump's team doesn't even seem to have a coherent legal argument on some of the basics. Did the FBI plant evidence, as the former president initially suggested? Or were these his documents that he wants back? Did he declassify the documents, as Trump claims? And then if so, why did his lawyers argue that the documents are still so sensitive, quote, that it would be appropriate for the special master to possess a top secret SCI security clearance? Bottom line, before today's hearings, Trump's lawyers had not been able to get their act together, and some of them may be in real trouble here. It's widely reported Trump has had a tough time hiring counsel. Former Assistant Special Watergate Prosecutor John Sale came on this program, said he was offered a spot on the team, and presented this explanation for why he didn't take the case.
Practice, and I couldn't take on all the complex issues.
Basically saying that he was too busy. Joining me now is former U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of Georgia, Michael J. Moore, who has been much more skeptical than many in the left-leaning media that there will be an indictment, and former Associate White House Counsel under Trump, May Mailman. Thanks to both of you for coming on the show. Appreciate it. All right, so, Michael, what do you make of my critique here of the lawyers and how much trouble the various, and I'm not talking about the people who made the arguments today, I'm really talking about more the initial team, how much trouble they could be in?
Well, I'm glad to be with you both. I really think that the legal work thus far has been a lot like a high school marching band without a drum major. They've been out on the field, and they think whoever can make the most noise and put on the biggest show is going to please the crowd. And there's nobody that's been really keeping the beat and keeping them, on the same page. They've been missing sort of the high-end spokesman to go around instead of having 300 or half a dozen voices on the news. You know, on 300 shows, they need to have one person making statements so that they can keep on the same page. And I really think it's been a series of, even in the initial pleadings, sort of they were more like carnival barkers than they were serious lawyers, and I think that's been a problem for it. Hopefully now, they've got some lawyers in front of this judge that will make cogent arguments about their case. I mean, the fact is that they were about 2 weeks late to this party to file their motion for the special master. I totally agree with you. It's not going to make a big difference in the case. It's nothing particularly unusual. There's nothing nefarious about asking for one, and there'll be nothing particularly nefarious if the judge doesn't grant it. But it's a good argument to make, and it also draws out information that the Trump's team does not have. So they can use this to get information about what the government's theories are. Is this going to be an obstruction case? Is this going to be an Espionage Act case? Are we talking about real classified documents? Are we talking about things that may have been overclassified? They can get information if they'll strategically try to make good arguments in front of the judge. And maybe now we'll see. I mean, I don't like to second guess lawyers in cases. These can be tough cases, but up until this point, underwhelmed would be a pretty generous statement.
May Mailman, I mean, look, I've been saying publicly that I still think it's less likely than probable that the former president will be indicted. I think it's something like 40% chance that he'll be indicted. We'll see if that happens. But putting that aside for a moment, the question of whether the former president will be indicted, does seem to me that the lawyer, in particular Christina Bobb, is in a pickle here, because she signs this document on June the 3rd, which says that there's been due diligence done and there are no more classified documents. And then the search, whether you like the search, you don't like the search, it happens, and they find all of these documents. She's in a tough spot, no?
She's definitely in a tough spot, and it might not have been her, it might have been Evan Corcoran, but I think actually this is a real indictment on our legal community, because if this were any other president, you would have every major law firm jumping to represent him from the very beginning. And I think even when we were, post 9/11 and there were terrorists that were being held at Gitmo, you had every major law firm jumping to represent them in the Supreme Court. And this wasn't somebody who stiffed their bills. These are people who were pro bono to begin with. And even Kirkland and Ellis was uncomfortable representing people who are law-abiding gun owners. So yes, it is the case that you have some inexperienced lawyers here, but it's the legal community's fault.
Well, let me. By the way, I spoke out against Kirkland and Ellis about that incident where they pulled all their Second Amendment cases for purely political reasons. Totally agree with you in that case. But what did you make today? Let's move to today, because I think we all agree that the Trump legal team before today was a total mess, or a mess, depending on where you are on the spectrum there. But Michael J. Moore, in terms of the arguments they made today, in terms of what the judge said today, do you expect that the judge is going to order a special master, and how much does that hurt the Department of Justice if she does?
I really think at this point it's probably likely. It does not hurt the department at all. The argument they're making is that they've already done the work, so why do we need to have any delay at all for somebody to look at this information? There's a difference here when we're talking about a special master coming in. If you have a search warrant of a law office and they're looking for documents, and a taint team, I guess we should say, if a taint team is there looking at documents, because these may be privileged information that belong to clients other than a potential accused. The special master here might view it a little bit different and look a little bit more carefully, maybe through a little bit finer lens on information that may in fact be attorney-client privileged, or maybe information that would be shielded by some privilege from seizure by the FBI. I think the claims of executive privilege are gone. Trump does not own these documents. And he does not own the privilege. It belongs to the sitting president at the time. And so I think getting away from that will help the argument. One thing that we have not talked about, and I'll throw it in at this point, and that is these lawyers that have been making representations, especially written representations and statements to federal investigators. There's a statute, it's a 1001 violation, and what it says is if you lie to a federal investigator during a federal investigation in some material respect, that's a felony. Yeah. And so you don't see lawyers prosecuted a lot because they're typically advocating for a client's position. But we also know that lawyers close to Trump sometimes end up taking the fall. You can ask Michael Cohen how that worked. And so that's a big matter here, and hopefully this new set of lawyers will stay away from that and be clear about what the statements are and who they're coming from.
May Mailman, I made the point before that it seemed unclear what the Trump team's position was on some critical questions, like, for example, did he declassify the documents? That seemed to be his argument, and then yet in the court filings, his team is saying it would be appropriate for the special master to possess a top-secret SCI security level. Why would they need that if the documents were declassified?
Well, I think, the Espionage Act really has to go toward not whether the documents are classified, but whether they are, national defense sensitive. And so I think it makes sense to make sure that somebody has gone through the security process, which most people, I think, who they would look at as appointing a special master probably, would. Mm-hmm. So I think in that sense, you want somebody who has been vetted, somebody who's not going to pose a national security risk, and so therefore has that security clearance, not because the documents are classified, but because, they might cover topics that at least DOJ is saying are
but if they are, if you take the Trump, I guess it's not the Trump team because they're not arguing that they're declassified. He's arguing that they were declassified. If they're declassified, then it doesn't seem to me you need any, because in theory then at that point, it's not classified anymore, and so you don't need someone with that kind of You understand my point. It does seem like a contradiction in their argument.
Right. And I think that just because you're asking for somebody to be vetted to view these documents, I don't necessarily see that as inconsistent with the fact that the documents were technically declassified. Because at the end of the day, and I think that Trump's latest lawyer, the former Florida Solicitor General, really made this point. Let's remember what we're talking about here. This is not, and I'm going to say Hillary Clinton's emails where you've got tens of thousands of emails going to random private email accounts. Right, these are at the president's home, protected by Secret Service, looked at by the president.
Right, except the difference, of course, as we've talked about in the show before, is that when you actually go through all of those emails, they weren't nearly as highly classified as these documents, which seems to be the greatest concern. Michael J. Moore, you wanted to get in real quick, final thought?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason you ask for somebody who's been vetted is because it just removes one sort of kink in the rope here. I mean, and that is, the judge can say, and if I were the judge, I'd probably say, look, I'm going to appoint somebody who has this top secret clearance. We're not taking up today whether or not the documents are classified or declassified. You can save that argument for another day. But out of an abundance of caution and to make sure that nobody's waiving anything, either the department or Trump.
Yeah, that's fair.
I would just put somebody in. It's just a belt and suspenders move that she can make. Doesn't hurt anybody. And it starts to maybe rebuild some public confidence in the proceeding.
But again, I'm going to make a final point, which is I don't think that this whole special master thing is that important. I do think that the Trump legal team opened an enormous door here for the Department of Justice to make this long argument in a court filing that they wouldn't have been able to make if this court filing had never been made. Michael J. Moore and May Malman, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Go to NewsNationNow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.